On this week's episode of the 262 Fishing Friday Forum, we're talking about what routinely is considered one of the most controversial topics in bass fishing. This week we're diving into a little bit of controversy about bass fishing, and that topic is whether or not we should be fishing for bass that are actively spawning and on their beds. Now, we can get into really deep discussions about how to fish for them and the activities that the bass display during the spawn if you do decide to fish for them, and that's something that truthfully other YouTubers have done well enough that I really don't even need to get into it for right now. Maybe I will in the future, but right now we're talking about whether you should even bother trying to catch these fish off of their beds. The spawn is a huge time for the bass. It's important for us because it's how the fish obviously reproduce, which renews this resource, renews the bass in the lake so that there's more of them to catch. But of course, there are times, especially now that bass fishing is year-round on a catch and release basis here in Wisconsin, and even beforehand, there were times where the weather would hold off and the cold weather would stay late, and the spawn wouldn't even start until after fishing opened for game fish here in Wisconsin, and you could bed fish. But whether you should or not is entirely up to you, and we'll talk about both sides of the argument. At the end, I'll tell you what I personally do and how I go about it, and of course, we'll have a discussion down in the comment section about what you guys think as well. Alright, so let's start with why people generally argue you should not be fishing for bed fish, for bedding bass, for bass that are protecting their spawn, and the number one reason is it damages the fish. It potentially harms them. You might be able to release them, but the stress that's put on them, oftentimes people will argue that fish that are released even quickly still get sick and still potentially die. Now, if those bass are protecting their eggs, they're protecting their bed, and they die, they're obviously not able to protect it. Or if they're sick, they can't protect it as well. And now other fish come in and they start eating the eggs off of the bed. Obviously, more eggs being eaten leads to fewer eggs being able to hatch, which means fewer little fingerling bass that can grow up to be those big 5-pound bass that we're all chasing. So it reduces the chance for the survival of the species, not only for the size, but for the numbers as well. Now, let's say you are one of those anglers that decides you are going to bed fish and you only keep those fish off of the bed for maybe 30 seconds or so. You get a quick picture if it's a nice one and you put it right back in. Depending on the time of year, that bass may or may not go straight back to their bed. And actually, not so much the time of year, but how locked on they are to the bed. Sometimes they'll be cruising around and kind of protecting the area and they might not go back to their bed. Sometimes they'll be locked on and you can watch them swim right back to right where you caught them, which is a really cool thing to see. But even that short amount of time, either them being out of the water or swimming around trying to figure out where their bed was, or if they don't want to go back right away, that's time that, again, those other fish can come in and eat the eggs or destroy the bed, and that's something that, again, potentially can harm the future of this resource. One argument I've never seen brought up, and maybe it hasn't, I just haven't seen it, and I certainly haven't seen any studies about it, is what about your lures actually damaging the bed? When you're bed fishing and you're sight fishing, you're dragging a lure, usually it's a heavier jig, right through the bed, right on top of the eggs. Now, I don't know whether or not that's going to cause damage to the eggs or not. I've never seen that argument. I've never seen the research, but it's another argument that I'm going to go ahead and bring up right now. You could potentially be damaging those eggs. And again, fewer eggs means fewer hatchlings, means less of a resource in the future. All right, so now let's talk about why it's okay to bed fish. Maybe not necessarily why you should. I mean, you can if you want, if you use these arguments to support why you bed fish. And number one is kind of what I talked about earlier. You catch the fish, maybe you take a quick picture, you get it off the hook right away, you release it, and that fish goes right back to its bed. By the time those fish are locked on, that's when the eggs are there. That's when they're like, all right, I got to protect these eggs. I got to protect this bed. And they will absolutely go right back to that bed that they were sitting on. And if you can keep that time down, usually you can keep an eye on that bed. And I know when I'm able to do it quickly, I've never seen any bluegill or anything like that come in and start eating the eggs off the bed. I've been able to get that bass right back to their bed. Probably the biggest reason people bed fish is because you're sight fishing. When fish bed, they're shallower up. They're usually in clearer water. If they're in dirtier water, they're even more shallow because they need that heat from the sun for their spawn to be able to hatch and what's the fancy word that we learned in science? Not acclimate. Put the word down below because I'm not doing too great with the whole thinking thing. Incubate. They need the heat from the sun to incubate the eggs. And so clearer water, they can go a little deeper. Murkier water, they got to go shallower to get that sun to heat up the eggs. Either way, the point is you're going to actually be able to see the fish, watch its behavior, see it get all aggravated because you're putting this bluegill looking thing or this bright looking lure right in their bed, and you can actually watch them grab your lure and sometimes spit it right back out and sometimes try and carry it off the bed. It's really cool to see, even if you're not trying to actually catch the fish. It's kind of a fun thing to watch, and it's really exciting to see how these fish will protect their bed, and it's really fun to catch those fish. But again, you got to get them back in the water as soon as possible. The biggest reason I would say it's okay to bed fish is the DNR doesn't say you're not allowed to do it, especially now that catch and release is year-round here in Wisconsin for bass. There's nothing that the DNR has said or nothing that they've done to say that we shouldn't be catching fish and catching bass off of their beds. Now, obviously, in the off season, we have to release them right away, and we can get in a whole nother argument about during the regular season whether you should be keeping bass or not. There are some people that'll say, oh, I'll never keep a bass, we need to keep that resource, and some people will use the same argument. They say they taste good and the DNR says it's fine, so why not? And I kind of go along with that logic. Getting into my view on the whole thing, I'm okay with bed fishing and sight fishing and getting bass off their beds, as long as whether you're allowed to keep them or not, you're getting them back released as soon as possible so they can get back on their beds and protect their spawn and protect their bed. Really, the DNR does a ton of research on maintaining the resources and making sure it's a renewable resource so that we can all enjoy fishing. This is a topic, the whole catch and release in the off season is something they looked into for years and years and did a ton of research on. I have no doubt that they also looked into the effect of bed fishing and fishing during the spawn. Now, obviously, I'm sure they would prefer you release the fish back, especially during the spawn, but they haven't said anything one way or the other, as far as I know at least. Maybe it's changed with this whole catch and release thing, as far as keeping them during the seasons you're allowed to keep them. The point is the DNR's got a good handle on this. If they decide in a few years from now that, you know what, this whole catch and release thing isn't working, or it is working but we need to make sure that people release fish if they're bedding regardless of the season, the DNR's on their game with this. They know what's going on and they've got the best interest of both renewing the resource and the fishermen in mind. So that being said, spring is here finally. I actually just got my boat back out of storage a couple days ago. I'm getting it ready and I plan on going out, and when the water warms up, I will be doing some bed fishing. I will be doing some sight fishing, but I will be getting those fish back in as soon as humanly possible. Like I said, catch the fish. If it's a nice one, take a real quick picture, get it back in right away, let it get back to protecting its nest so that we can have more bass to catch in the future. But as always, let's keep the conversation going down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. If there's an argument for or against bed fishing, let me know, because obviously I'd love to hear it. I'm always open-minded to these things. Maybe you'll change my opinion, I don't know. Or maybe you'll change someone else's opinion that says, no, you should never bed fish. But maybe you've got a really good argument, I don't know. But you'll never know if you don't comment. So comment down below. And as always, guys, push the thumbs up to like the videos, subscribe, and all that good stuff to follow my journey to catch a fish in every lake right here in Waukesha County. If you're local to the area, let me know where you'd like me to fish next, and that's where I'll head to. And to see a list of the lakes that I've already caught a fish on, that's down in the description below. And as always, folks, remember, it doesn't matter if you go around the world or go around the corner, just as long as you go fishing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the water.